Her son joked she was just a tax write-off, and the table laughed with him. Dolores Mendes, 71, didn't flinch. She memorized every word. By the end of the fiscal quarter, his refund would be frozen, and she'd own the entire house. No screaming, no spectacle, just notarized clarity. She'd been filed away like a deduction for 6 years. Now she'd show them what independent really meant, in paper, in court, and on her terms. We're about to begin. But if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. The dining room smelled like garlic bread and tired obligations. Dolores sat at the far end of the walnut table, her wine glass catching soft reflections from the overhead pendant light. Across from her, Jared was swirling his soda with a straw he didn't need, the ice clinking in a rhythm she found oddly smug. Tanya, her daughter-in-law, had just finished ranting about gas prices again when the conversation slouched toward money, as it always did. "I swear everything's a damn expense now," Tanya said, stabbing her salad like it had wronged her. "Groceries, heat, property taxes. We should get some kind of hardship discount for just surviving this year." Jared chuckled, pushing a fork full of penne into his mouth. "Guess it's lucky we've got Mom on the books," he said through the bite. Tanya grinned, slow and knowing. "Right, Grandma as a tax break?" Dolores looked up. "What was that?" Jared wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Oh, come on. We're joking. Just a dumb inside joke. You know we keep you around for the tax benefits." He laughed, but something in his eyes flickered with challenge. Tanya added, "It's just, funny." Dolores didn't smile. She didn't tilt her head or pretend not to notice how they glanced at each other after the comment, the way people do when they think the target's too old or too passive to catch the jab. Instead, she stared down at her plate, slowly cutting a tomato in half like it might answer something for her. Jared laughed again, a nervous edge now sneaking into it. "She knows it's a joke, right?" Dolores set her fork down. The clink on ceramic was deliberate, measured. "Of course," she said softly, but she didn't look up. She reached for her wine glass and took a long sip, letting the tannins settle on her tongue as if trying to erase the taste of their voices. The rest of the dinner unfolded like a scene rehearsed too many times. Jared launched into a monologue about refinancing the car. Tanya bemoaned Zoe's orthodontist bills. Dolores nodded in the right places, offered nothing more. By the time she loaded her plate into the dishwasher, the kitchen felt colder. Or maybe it was just her chest. That night, after they'd all retreated to their respective corners of the house, Jared and Tanya binge-watching some show with too much yelling, Zoe tucked away in her room with earbuds and calculus, Dolores walked into her bedroom and locked the door. She knelt down beside the cedar chest at the foot of her bed, pushed aside the quilt her sister had made 40 years ago, and pulled out a thin brown accordion folder labeled in her tidy script, "Shared Years." She sat cross-legged on the bed, folder open in her lap, flipping through the layers of returns, printouts, and post-it notes. Patrice had made her keep copies just in case. Though at the time, Dolores hadn't quite believed the case would ever come. She lingered on the 2019 1040 form. There in Jared's handwriting was her name typed neatly under dependents. Again in 2020, again in 2021, and again last year. She hadn't signed any of them. No discussion, no permission, just assumed. Her name, her actual identity, was reduced to a line item that padded their refund and fed their smugness. Dolores let the documents fan out across her comforter like a slow-motion explosion. Her fingers trembled slightly, but not from fear, from clarity. She stood, walked to her desk in the corner of the room, and clicked on the brass banker's lamp. The warm pool of light illuminated a fresh manila folder. She picked up a pen, wrote the title in all caps, Solo, 2024. She clipped a blank IRS Form 1040 to the top. Then, beneath that, a checklist Patrice had given her years ago, documents for independent filers. As she scanned the list, her eyes narrowed on a sticky note she'd once scribbled, long forgotten at the bottom of the drawer. Never confuse living together with being taken care of. She smiled, the kind of smile that knows exactly where it's going. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Tanya. "Don't forget, need you to sign that tax doc tomorrow." Just routine. Dolores stared at it for a full minute, then powered off the phone. She reached into the folder labeled Shared Years, pulled out a single page, and ran her fingers down the signature line she'd never touched. Then she pulled out a red pen and drew a line straight through her name. Morning filtered through the curtains in watery stripes, but Dolores was already up. She sat at the kitchen table in her robe, coffee cooling beside her as she arranged pages and rows like evidence on a detective's wall. Jared's W-2s, the household utilities, her Social Security award letters, and every tax return from the past 6 years. She didn't need her reading glasses to see it clearly anymore. Her name was there year after year, a dependent under Jared and Tanya's return, snug between Zoe and some vague medical deduction Tanya had once claimed with a wink. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the ease with which they'd used her, folded her into their narrative as if she were a line they could reuse without consequence. She opened her laptop, clicked Patrice Lang's contact, and pressed the call icon. Her thumb hovered for only a second before committing. It rang twice. "Dolores?" Patrice's voice was still raspy from sleep. "Everything okay?" There was a pause before Dolores answered. "It's time." Another pause, but heavier this time. Patrice shifted into alertness. "You want to file solo?" Dolores nodded, though no one could see her. For real this time, no shared deductions, no guesswork, no assumptions. The sound of papers rustling came from Patrice's end. "Understood. I'll prep a full independent filing packet. And, Dolores, this might trigger some flags. You ready for that?" "I'm more than ready." After the call ended, Dolores clicked through the IRS website, requesting her full filing transcript, all 6 years, all forms. By the time Jared wandered in, yawning and scratching at his chest like a teenager, she'd already printed the IRS Form 8821 Tax Information Authorization. His eyes passed over the table, narrowing for a half-second at the scattered returns. Then he grabbed a banana and wandered out without a word. The door slammed. The silence left behind felt loaded. Dolores gathered the documents, slid them into her newly labeled Solo 2024 folder, and carried it to her room. There was no urgency in her step, only certainty. By afternoon, Leah arrived with a box of fresh croissants and her usual irreverent energy. She placed the bag on the counter and paused mid-sentence when she saw the folders lined up on the dining table. "Well, hell," she said, removing her sunglasses like she was stepping onto a crime scene. "Looks like someone's going to war with polite smiles and paper clips." Dolores allowed herself the ghost of a smirk. "They used my name," she said, not dramatically, but as fact. "Filed me as their dependent. I didn't even know." Leia's mouth tightened. "Those little shits. They thought I wouldn't notice," Dolores added. "Or that I wouldn't understand it even if I did. Then they forgot what decade we're from." Leia muttered, setting down her purse. She scanned the paperwork, nodded approvingly, then tilted her head. "You got Patrice in on this?" Dolores nodded. "She's prepping the filing. And you requested your full IRS record." "Already done." Leia let out a low whistle. "You know, there's this old saying we used in audit teams. You can't bury the body if Grandma kept the receipt." Dolores chuckled, not fully but enough. Leia leaned closer, voice dropping. "They picked the wrong grandma at a short change." Dolores's smile sharpened into something quieter. "They never even thought I'd read the forms." Leia grabbed a croissant and took a bite, crumbs scattering onto the envelope labeled 2019. Redacted copy. She chewed thoughtfully, then pointed with the pastry.
"Good. Keep that fire."
"Don't go soft just because they'll cry when the IRS comes knocking." "They won't cry," Dolores said, walking to her printer. "They'll get defensive and loud. That's their fluency." From the printer, she collected a confirmation page. Her request for 6 years of IRS transcripts was processing. She held it up to the light, nodded once, and clipped it to the inside cover of her file. Then she picked up the sticky note Tanya had left on the fridge earlier that morning. Please sign blank tax docs by Friday. We'll handle the rest. She folded it, slipped it into the shredder, and pressed down slowly until the last of it disappeared into thin gray ribbons. The office smelled like ink and lemon disinfectant, just sharp enough to wake the senses. Patrice slid a thick envelope across the desk, her fingernails tapping once against the sealed flap.
It's all in there, she said.
Independent federal filing. Paper trails clean, numbers match your accounts, and I included the pre-filled affidavit. You just need to sign. Dolores nodded, her face calm, but her hands deliberate. She reached into her bag, pulled out her favorite blue pen, the one she reserved for documents that mattered, and uncapped it without flourish. She skimmed the top of the form, eyes narrowing at the bold black title. IRS Form 14039. Identity Theft Affidavit. Even now, the phrasing gave her pause. I never thought I'd need this, she murmured. Patrice's expression softened, but she didn't offer sympathy, only respect. People think identity theft means strangers in far-off places. Most of the time, it's someone who knows your middle name and your favorite pie. Dolores signed slowly, pressing the pen just a little harder than needed. When she finished, she exhaled like she'd just unpacked something invisible from her chest. They submitted the affidavit and fraud alert online from Patrice's secure system. As the documents uploaded one by one, Dolores sipped the paper cup of coffee Patrice had offered earlier. It was weak, oversweet, but she drank the whole thing anyway. It felt like a ceremony. By noon it was done. 6 years of unauthorized filings were now flagged, an official line drawn between her name and their manipulations. Outside the accountant's office, the February wind clawed at her coat as she stepped to the curb. A soft sleet began to fall, just enough to blur the corners of the street signs. Dolores didn't flinch. She just walked home slower than usual, letting the cold sting a little. She wanted to feel the edges of this day. When she arrived, the house was quiet. Jared's car was gone. Zoe's backpack was by the door. From the kitchen came the rhythmic sound of Tanya chopping something on the butcher block. Dolores hung up her coat, set her purse on the counter, and was halfway through pouring a glass of water when Tanya turned with a practiced smile. Hey, perfect timing. I actually printed out that tax doc for you. It's just the routine one. You know, the dependent verification we do every year. She gestured toward the manila envelope sitting too neatly on the kitchen island. Dolores didn't touch it. Instead, she took a slow sip of water, then met Tanya's eyes. I won't be signing anything this year. Tanya's smile faltered for half a breath, then returned thinner. What do you mean? It's the same basic paperwork as always. Jared already filled in most of it. That's the problem, Dolores said evenly. This year, I'm not a name on your forms, not a deduction, not a dependent. She walked past Tanya and placed her glass in the sink. Tanya turned, a knife still in her hand. Wait, what does that even mean? Are you what? Filing something on your own now? Dolores paused in the doorway. Her voice was gentle but precise. This year, she said, I'm just a ghost on your forms. Tanya blinked.
What?
Dolores didn't repeat it. She simply walked down the hall, footsteps quiet on the hardwood. She closed the door to her bedroom behind her, but not before catching a glimpse of Tanya still frozen in the kitchen, lips slightly parted, knife hovering midair like a sentence she couldn't finish. In her room, Dolores sat down at her desk. She opened the laptop and checked the email from the IRS. Your identity theft affidavit has been received and is under active review. Then she pulled a small locked box from her bottom drawer. Inside it were bank records, notarized statements of residence, receipts in her own name. She had collected it all. They could argue all they wanted. What she had was proof, but proof was only the start. Had she locked the box again? Her phone buzzed with a new text.
Jared.
Tanya says, you're being weird. Can we talk later? Dolores stared at it, not angry, just done. She powered off the phone and slid it into her desk drawer. Then she opened a new document on her computer and typed the header, 2024 tax year. Audit trail. She smiled to herself, not with victory. Not yet, but with preparation. The envelope came on a Thursday. Plain white standard government print in the top left corner.
Department of the Treasury.
Internal Revenue Service. Jared tossed it onto the kitchen table without looking at the return address. Dolores watched from the hallway, unseen as he opened the fridge, chugged half a sports drink, and wandered off to the garage in socks and irritation. 20 minutes later, the garage door slammed open again. "Tanya," he bellowed, the IRS letter clenched in one shaking hand. "Did you mess with last year's return?" Tanya came down the stairs, towel in her hair, annoyed. "What number? Why would I? What's going on?" Jared slapped the paper onto the dining table. "It says we're being audited. A preliminary inquiry into dependent eligibility for tax years 2018 through 2023. What the hell does that mean?" Tanya picked up the letter, skimmed it, and frowned. "It's probably a glitch. They do this sometimes. I'll call the helpline." "It's not a glitch," Jared shouted, pacing now. "They referenced our amended 2020 and 2021 filings. It said, something doesn't match the independent records." What the hell changed? The kitchen door creaked open. Dolores stepped inside with her grocery bag half full, a gallon of milk, a bag of spinach, and the faintest smile. "You all right?" she asked, her voice low and neutral. Tanya turned on her like a switchblade. "Did you file something?" "I did," Dolores replied, setting the milk down and removing her gloves. "Filed as an independent. It was time." Jared's eyes snapped to her. "You filed without telling us?" Dolores looked him in the face. "You filed with me for 6 years without telling me." Tanya threw the towel onto a chair. "Are you trying to sabotage us?" "No," Dolores said calmly. "I'm correcting something. You claimed me without my consent. I reclaimed myself." Jared snorted, a sharp, joyless sound.
What?
"You think you're being noble?" "No," Dolores said. "I think I'm being accurate." From the living room, Zoe appeared halfway down the stairs, earbuds still in. She didn't say anything at first, just leaned against the railing watching. Tanya stepped forward, lowering her voice but sharpening the edge. "You're going to cost us thousands. They might claw back all those refunds plus penalties." Dolores tilted her head. "Then maybe you shouldn't have treated my name like a rebate." Tanya's mouth opened, then closed. Jared rubbed his face like it might change the facts. Dolores moved past them to pour herself a glass of water. She took her time, measured each movement. It wasn't defiance, it was ownership. At that moment, the front door opened. Leia breathed in with a tin of lemon bars and a thermos of her hibiscus tea. "Smells like tension in here," she said cheerfully. "Someone forget to hide the body?" Zoe giggled quietly. Tanya glared. "This doesn't concern you." "Oh, sweetheart," Leia said, setting down her bag. "I worked in the IRS for 30 years. You'd be shocked what concerns me." She turned to Dolores. "You tell them yet?"
I did.
Leia poured tea into a chipped mug, took a long sip, then laughed so hard, she nearly choked.
"You claimed me."
"I reclaimed myself." Good Lord, that should be a damn t-shirt. Put it in cursive. Even Jared cracked a smirk, brief and bitter. Tanya, however, looked like she was calculating the weight of every word. Zoe finally spoke, her voice quiet but clear. "Is this why you've been shredding stuff, Grandma?" Dolores glanced up, caught her granddaughter's eyes, and nodded, just clearing out what never belonged. Zoe blinked, thoughtful, then turned and walked back up the stairs. Leia leaned in and whispered with a grin. "Kids smarter than both of them combined." Tanya snatched the audit letter and stormed into the office. Jared stood still for a moment longer, then followed, muttering something about getting ahead of it. Dolores sipped her tea. Outside, sleet turned to snow. Her phone buzzed on the counter with a new notification. IRS. Additional correspondence mailed to taxpayer. See Notice CP 75. She set the phone down without opening the message. The IRS field office sat behind a dentist's practice and a payday loan storefront, too easy to miss if you didn't know to look inside. It smelled faintly of paper and dust-filtered air conditioning, the kind that hummed with bureaucratic disinterest. Dolores sat upright in a hard plastic chair, the manila folder in her lap thick with proof. She wore her gray wool coat, though she didn't plan to keep it on. She wanted to look composed when the moment came to shed it. Patrice sat beside her, legs crossed, glasses perched low on her nose as she reviewed a checklist one final time. You've got bank records, insurance statements, and utility bills. You didn't miss anything, Dolores. You're clean. I know, Dolores said quietly. She looked down at her hands, folded neatly over the folder. That's why I'm here. A door opened with a low creak, and a woman stepped out, short in a navy pantsuit, clipboard in hand. Mrs. Mendes, I'm Agent Corin Odler. Thanks for coming in. They followed her down a corridor that seemed longer than the building should allow. The conference room was functional. Tan walls, fake ficus, 2 bright lights. Dolores placed her folder gently on the table, sat, and waited for the first question. Agent Adler took her time, flipped through the initial paperwork. Your affidavit triggered a cross-match on 6 years of joint tax returns filed by Jared Mendes. Is that your son? Dolores nodded. He claimed you as a dependent in each of those filings. You're stating that was unauthorized. Yes, Dolores said evenly. I was never informed, and I never signed any paperwork approving it. Did you receive any financial support from Mr. Mendes during those years? Dolores opened the folder. These are utility bills in my name from the guest house meter. Here are my Medicare premiums, direct withdrawals from my account, and I have 3 years of receipts from paying my own property taxes. Adler's brows lifted slightly. You paid taxes on a house your son owns. I own 51% of the deed, Dolores said. The arrangement wasn't a gift. It was convenience for them. Adler flipped through the documents in silence, checking things off. At one point, she turned to Patrice. You're the CPA listed on her most recent filing. I am, Patrice said, voice crisp. And I reviewed her filings back to 2017. Dolores has never been financially dependent. Not even close. Adler gave a single subtle nod, then turned to Dolores again. You said something in your affidavit that stood out. I lived in their house, but I was never their burden. Do you stand by that? I do, Dolores said, hands steady on the table. And now I'd like the record to stand by me. Adler clicked her pen and made one final note. Understood. By the time Dolores returned home, the sun had dipped behind the rooftops, casting long shadows across the lawn. The house looked quiet still, but she knew that kind of silence. It wasn't peace. It was pressure. Jared was waiting just inside the foyer, arms crossed, jaw clenched. The IRS letter was crumpled on the table behind him. Not the audit notice, something new, official, thick. You went to a federal investigator, he said.
No. Hello. No pretense.
I did. He stepped forward. Do you even understand what you started? I understand perfectly. You've put me at risk, Dolores. She raised an eyebrow. I didn't put you anywhere. You built this, Jared. I just turned on the light. He slammed a hand on the wall. They're talking about a full investigation now, not just a review. A goddamn audit trail going back years. Back taxes, interest, fraud penalties. Dolores took a slow breath. Then I suggest you look at your records. I looked at them, he hissed. They've got my social, my filings, my signature on those returns. You claimed me, she said, stepping closer, voice colder now. I reclaimed myself. He looked stunned, not by her words, but by her calm, like he'd expected her to flinch and fold the way she always had when his anger got loud. I'm not the one who needs to worry about returns, she added quietly. That's your inbox now from the living room. Zoe's voice called faintly, Dad. Jared looked away. Dolores walked past him, set her keys down, and picked up the remote. From the table behind him, the IRS letter still lay open. The top page had one bold sentence highlighted in yellow. Subject to extended review under Federal Statute Section 726, knowingly filing false returns. It started with a ping. Jared sat at the breakfast bar, half listening to a podcast he didn't care about, scrolling through his inbox with bleary eyes. The subject line didn't hit him at first. Refund status. RS action required. He clicked without thinking. When he finished reading, he stood up too fast. The stool scraped against the tile with a shriek that sent Tanya rushing in from the hallway. What now? Jared turned the screen toward her. They froze the refund. Tanya blinked. Froze what? Why? Pending audit outcome. Jared read aloud, voice tight. Do not distribute or access associated funds. They're holding it hostage. Tanya's eyes narrowed. That refund was ours. I already calculated it into our April credit cards. Jared shoved the laptop aside. Well, now it's gone. Tanya stood frozen for a moment, mouth open. Then she exploded. You ruined our year, she shrieked. You said this wouldn't get serious. You said they'd just flag it. Maybe send a form. I told you not to claim her again. I told you. Dolores, standing just outside the doorway, took a single breath and walked in. You can lower your voice, she said, calm but firm. It won't unfreeze anything. Tanya spun toward her like heat-seeking shrapnel. You think this is funny? You think this is some clever stunt to ruin our taxes and play victim? Dolores walked past her and opened the hall closet. Inside were two sturdy boxes labeled guest house, docks, and linens. Tanya stared. What are you doing? Dolores pulled the boxes out and set them on the bench. I'm moving into the guest house. Jared stepped in. Now what? That place hasn't been used in years. It's on the property, Dolores said. And more importantly, on the deed, my portion. Yeah, but You assumed I'd stay in this main house forever. Dependent, invisible, easy to document and forget. But the space behind the garden shed, that's mine too. And starting tomorrow, I'm reclaiming the square footage the same way I reclaimed my tax record. Tanya's jaw worked silently before finally spitting. This is spite. No, Dolores replied. This is space. She carried the first box out through the back door. The wind was sharp, but she didn't flinch. The backyard still held patches of thin snow melting into the dormant grass. The guest house stood at the edge of the lot, a small gray-sided structure with a wraparound porch. Jared once promised to renovate. When things settled down, he never had. Now Dolores had keys and an updated deed to back her entrance. The inside smelled faintly of dust and lavender sachets. Dolores opened the windows, letting the February air cut through the stagnancy. Then she returned to the main house. Lila arrived 20 minutes later with a rolling crate and 2 cups of coffee. Is it true? She asked, walking in without waiting for an answer. Did the IRS actually freeze the refund? They did, Dolores said, handing her a labeled folder. Here's the confirmation. Lila gave a low whistle. They thought you were just a filing fluke, not a fuse. Together, they carried armfuls of documents into the guest house. Personal bank statements, homeownership proof, one blue ceramic mug labeled, "Don't touch my deductions." Midway through the afternoon, Dolores logged into her insurance provider's website, clicked through the accounts, and canceled the shared household policy. It took 4 minutes. She printed a new quote in her name only. When Jared saw the cancellation email come through, he appeared at the back door like a man catching a thief. You canceled our insurance. I canceled mine, Dolores said. You'll need your own policy now. Shouldn't be a problem. You're cutting us off. I'm cutting myself free. He looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he left the door open behind him as he turned away. Leah leaned against the kitchen counter, sipping her coffee. You're not just pulling out the nails, Dolores. You're replacing the wood. Dolores opened her notebook, flipped to a fresh page, and started a new list. Guest house. Official occupant change. Just as she finished the first line, her phone buzzed with a push alert. Property reassessment notification. Franklin County Assessor's Office. Your household ownership ratio has been flagged for update. She read it twice. Then she reached for her pen again. The assessor's letter arrived the next morning, folded inside a thin manila envelope stamped property ownership review. Time sensitive. Dolores stood at the guest house kitchen sink, mug of black coffee in one hand, the open letter in the other. The words didn't surprise her. They just confirmed what she already knew. Her deed filed June 2015. Ownership ratio, Dolores Mendes 51%, Jared Mendes 49%. She folded the paper in half, slid it into a plastic sleeve, and tucked it inside the binder marked legal title rights. By noon, she was knocking on the main house's back door, not to ask for entry, but as a courtesy. Jared opened it with a guarded look. "What now?" "I need a few minutes in the dining room," she said evenly. "What for?" "I think you'll want to be sitting down." Tanya was already in the kitchen, flipping through the grocery circular with sharp, jerky movements. She didn't look up when Dolores walked in. "If you're here to cancel something else, save it. We already got dropped from the family plan." Dolores set the binder on the table. "Not canceling, just clarifying." She opened it, flipped to the page, and slid it across the table. Jared read first, brows drawn together. Tanya read next, and went still. When her eyes finally snapped up, they were blazing. "This says you own more of the house than we do." Dolores nodded once. "I always have." "That wasn't the agreement," Tanya snapped, pushing the page back toward her. "It wasn't written, was it?" Dolores said, "Because I kept what was." Jared leaned forward, his voice low. "Why bring this up now?" "Because the IRS cares about ownership," she said.
So will the court if it comes to that.
Tanya let out a harsh laugh. "This is vindictive. You want the house now?" "I already have it," Dolores said. "You've been living like it belonged to you outright, but that was never true. I just didn't challenge the illusion until now." The silence hung like steam over a boiling pot, contained but threatening. Zoe walked in just then, backpack slung over one shoulder, earbud still in. She looked at the adults, then at the binder on the table. "Is something wrong?" "No," Dolores said gently. "Just untangling things that should have been clear from the start." Zoe hesitated. "Do I still get to visit you?" Dolores smiled, eyes softening. "You never needed permission." Zoe nodded and disappeared down the hall. Jared leaned back, rubbing his temples. "So what? You just take the house now?" "I'm formalizing what already exists," Dolores replied. "You'll still live here for now, but Patrice is filing transfer papers. My name will hold the deed fully." "You can't do that." "I can, and I will." Tanya's voice dropped into a hiss. "You think you're teaching us a lesson? You're breaking apart your own family." "No," Dolores said. "I'm drawing a boundary, and you don't get to call that a betrayal." Patrice stepped in through the front door, briefcase in hand, not needing an introduction. She moved to the table, pulled out a slim folder, and opened it beside the binder. "These are the deed reassignment forms," she said to Jared. "You'll want to read through and sign. Dolores is absorbing full title rights. We've already submitted preliminary intent to the county clerk." Jared's mouth opened, then closed. Tanya just stared at Patrice like she was furniture that had betrayed her. "I'd suggest doing this cleanly," Patrice added. "Once it moves to litigation, you lose leverage and credibility." From the hallway, Zoe peeked back in. Her voice was quiet.
"Dad."
Jared didn't answer. Patrice slid a pen across the table. It stopped just short of Tanya's elbow. "I'll give you a few minutes," Patrice said, standing. "Dolores, walk with me." Dolores followed her out the front door. They stepped onto the porch, just as the wind picked up. Patrice turned to her. "They'll fight it, but they'll lose." Dolores looked back at the window where Tanya now stood watching them like a ghost behind glass. "I'm not trying to win," she said. "Just trying to live where the truth fits." Behind them, the front door cracked open again, but no one spoke. Patrice handed her a final folder, unmarked. "It's time to think about what comes next." Dolores took it. "I already have." It was printed on thick ivory cardstock. No legalese, no clutter, just 10 lines of clean authority. Notice of termination of shared occupancy. Filed under breach of occupancy agreement. 30 days. Patrice had emailed a digital version earlier that morning, but Dolores asked her to bring a hard copy. Some things deserved the weight of paper. She slid the envelope across the dining room table while Jared sat slumped in the chair where he once boasted about write-offs and smart filing tricks. "This is final?" he asked, voice low, defeated. "You asked for time," Dolores said. "I'm giving you 30 days. That's more than required." He rubbed his jaw, red-eyed. Tanya's going to lose it. She already did, Dolores said. This just makes it official. Tanya did lose it. She tore the notice in half, then quarters, then shoved the pieces into the garbage disposal while muttering curses that didn't match the elegant backsplash behind her. That night, she posted a screen cap to her socials, just vague enough to be venomous. Family should stay in their place. Some of us forget where we came from. The caption included a single broken heart emoji. Dolores didn't reply, not with words. Instead, she uploaded a high-res photo of the property, the name clean and centered in bold at the top, and sent it to Patrice with a short subject line, receipt. Patrice posted the image to Dolores's new legal folder in their shared drive, timestamped and archived. Later that afternoon, Leia arrived carrying a helium balloon shaped like a W2 and a sheet cake that read, "Tax freedom never tasted sweeter." She poured champagne into mismatched mugs and made Dolores wear a sash that said "Depend no more" in glitter script. They laughed until Leia snorted powdered sugar, and Dolores finally let herself enjoy the weightlessness of decision. The party wasn't big, just the two of them, a jazz playlist humming in the background, and the clean clink of forks on ceramic. At sunset, Zoe slipped through the side gate. She didn't say anything at first, just lingered on the guest house porch with her hands in her coat pocket. Dolores saw her through the window and opened the door before she could knock. "Can I hang out here for a little?"
Zoe asked.
"It's loud inside." Dolores nodded and stepped aside. Zoe walked in, took one look at the banner still taped to the mantel, and cracked a small smile. Leia raised her glass. "Zoe, welcome to the tax-free zone." Zoe grinned. "Does that mean I don't have to do math homework?" "Nice try," Dolores said, patting her shoulder. Zoe didn't stay long, maybe 30 minutes. Long enough to sit cross-legged on the floor, sip apple cider, and ask questions about how deeds actually worked. Then she left with a hug and a whisper. "I hope they don't ruin it more." The next morning, Dolores opened her mailbox to find a folded piece of lined notebook paper tucked between the flyers and utility bill. On it, written in green gel pen, "I know it's not your fault. I hope I turn out more like you than them." Dolores didn't cry, but she did place the note inside her guest house drawer between the affidavit and the title reassignment documents. 10 days into the 30, Tanya packed the kitchen in angry silence while Jared sat on the porch pretending to check real estate listings. Most days, they avoided eye contact with Dolores. When they did speak, it was clipped sterile. That suited her just fine. Leia had taken to texting daily updates from legal forums. Apparently, Dolores's case was already making the rounds among a quiet group of elder financial advocates online. Patrice sent a final deed filing confirmation with the subject line, "Ownership secured." Dolores replied simply, "Thank you. Let's finish it." The courtroom was colder than expected. Dolores sat at the plaintiff's table in a navy blue blazer that had once been reserved for funerals. Today it was for something else. Closure. Beside her sat Patrice, crisp and composed, flipping through the tabs of a black accordion binder. Every document had been sorted days ago. Dolores hadn't come to scramble or defend. She'd come to end it. Across the aisle, Jared sat hunched beside a public interest attorney who looked like he hadn't slept. Tanya was 2 seats over, arms folded tight, sunglasses still on despite the lack of sun. She refused to meet anyone's eyes, not the judge, not Dolores, not even Zoe, seated quietly in the back row, earbuds removed, posture tense. The bailiff called the case.
Mendes.
Petition for sole title control. Secondary defense on eviction challenge. The judge was a woman in her 60s, silver hair pulled into a bun, glasses low on her nose as she scanned the docket. Her voice was even but clipped. "I've reviewed the submitted evidence," she said, adjusting her robe. "Let's begin with ownership status. Mrs. Dolores Mendez, please summarize your claim." Dolores stood.
No dramatics, no tremble.
"I hold 51% of the property's title, Your Honor. That share was established in 2015 and reaffirmed by the county recorder this year. My son and daughter-in-law were occupants under informal agreement. I have since terminated that arrangement legally, with full documentation of breach and cause. The judge looked up. And the cause? Dolores opened her folder and slid a single page forward. Patrice followed with 3 more. The misuse of my identity and federal tax filing, the false listing of my dependency status for 6 consecutive years, and the retaliatory claims filed after I corrected that record. The judge turned to Jared's attorney. Is the challenge still active? The man sighed and pushed a paper forward. My clients are rescinding the eviction dispute, but still contest the deed reassignment. The judge raised an eyebrow. On what basis?
Tanya spoke up for the first time.
She was supposed to be family. The judge glanced back at Dolores. You submitted joint account closures, utility splits, insurance terminations, multiple letters of notice, and this, she held up a page, is a notarized IRS statement confirming that Mrs. Mendes independently filed and that the prior returns are under federal review for misrepresentation. She looked back to Tanya and Jared. Which part exactly are you claiming she did wrong? Silence. Dolores didn't smile, but something inside her uncoiled. The judge turned to Zoe, as if aware of her presence, but not needing a word from her. Just acknowledgement. Then she turned back to Dolores. The only person in this room who seems to have handled taxes properly was her. A brief silence, then petition granted. Property control is now singularly assigned to Mrs. Dolores Mendes. Remaining parties have until the end of the month to vacate or file for a temporary extension with a valid hardship reason. If no filing is received, enforcement will proceed. Jared dropped his head. Tanya slammed her purse onto her lap and muttered something sharp, too quiet to catch. Zoe stared down at her hands, flushed and still. The judge gathered her notes. Court is adjourned. Outside, snow was beginning to fall again. Dolores and Patrice stepped into the parking lot, breath fogging the air in front of them. The sky was soft gray, the kind that muted sound and made the world feel like it was waiting for something to land. They'll appeal, Patrice said, though not with worry. They won't,
Dolores replied.
Because they can't. Because they won't know how, Dolores said. They only ever understood power when it was quiet and assumed, not when it stood up. From behind them came the sound of quick footsteps.
Zoe.
Grandma. Dolores turned. Zoe looked stricken, more tired than sad. I didn't know everything, but I do now. Dolores placed a hand on her shoulder. That's enough. Zoe nodded, then added almost in a whisper. I'm proud of you. Dolores didn't reply. She just squeezed her hand once. Patrice unlocked the car. You ready? Dolores took one final glance at the courthouse behind them, the place where the story got rewritten, not with fury, but with facts. Yes, she said. Let's go home. The lawyer's office smelled like wood polish and quiet decisions. Dolores sat with her back straight, purse at her feet, a stack of labeled documents in front of her. Patrice sat beside her, not as her CPA today, but as a quiet second set of eyes. Across the table, the estate attorney read aloud, Item 6, Revision of Final Beneficiaries per the client's instruction. Jared Mendes and Tanya Mendes are hereby removed as heirs. His voice didn't tremble. Neither did Dolores's expression. Initial here, he said, sliding the page across.
She did.
It was just ink and paper, but it felt like a steel door sliding shut on a room she'd once been locked inside. That afternoon, she met Leah at a coffee shop near the courthouse, a place with chipped mugs and good biscotti. Leah was already there, sipping something with foam and oat milk, a legal pad balanced on her knee. So, Leah said without looking up, you finally dropped him. I did, Dolores said, easing into the booth. About time. Dolores passed her a sealed envelope. You're now my emergency contact. The number is already listed in my primary medical record. Leah blinked, then grinned. So, I get the honor of pulling the plug someday? Dolores cracked a smile. Only if I ask nicely. They toasted with their mismatched mugs, and it didn't feel symbolic. Just earned. Later that week, Patrice returned to help sort through the final pieces, family accounts, lingering investments, stock holdings that Jared had once insisted she didn't need to worry about. Now they were all under her name, moved into private holdings, protected by layers of documentation. Patrice scanned the new spreadsheet on Dolores' screen. Everything's updated. You're officially off every shared account. Feels like changing the locks on invisible doors, Dolores said. You changed the house. Now you're changing the keys. The guest house had grown into something more than square footage. One wall now displayed a corkboard with pinned receipts, certified letters, and a printed copy of the final court ruling, like a museum exhibit called Proof That Silence was Mistaken for Consent. Below that hung a smaller frame, Zoe's handwritten note. I hope I turn out more like you than them. Dolores read it once a week, sometimes more. In early March, she met with a local nonprofit focused on elder housing equity. By the end of the month, she had sold 20% of the property's value into a senior co-op initiative. It didn't change her title. It just redirected the equity into a long-term housing grant fund for low-income elders navigating family-dependent legal battles. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it was hers. That night, she sat on the porch with Leah, sipping whiskey over ice. The stars were out, the kind of clear that made even Columbus feel quiet. You sold a fifth of your land to help strangers, Leah said. You're not even trying to be subtle about your sainthood arc. I'm just cleaning the slate, Dolores said.
Yeah, well.
Leah raised her glass. You made damn good use of the eraser. They clinked glasses. The sound was soft, lasting. Dolores finished updating her living trust on a rainy Tuesday. Zoe was still in the will, but under one condition. She would receive a locked education fund, redeemable only upon graduation, and only if no adult tried to access or redirect it. Tanya would hate that clause. Jared might never read it, but Dolores had it notarized anyway. As she filed it in her cabinet, another envelope slipped out, one she hadn't seen in years. A faded letter from Jared, dated 2009. A Father's Day card her late husband had never opened. Jared's handwriting, eager and young. Well, take care of her. Promise. Dolores didn't cry. She just refolded the paper, slid it back inside, and wrote on the envelope in steady ink. Promise voided. Legacy rewritten. The moving truck pulled into the driveway at 9:02 a.m., 2 days before the court-enforced deadline. Its diesel engine coughed to a stop, and two men in orange hoodies climbed out, looking too cheerful for the energy vibrating from the house. Dolores stood on the guest house porch in a soft gray sweater and dark jeans, her coffee mug warming both hands. Beside her, Patrice and Leah flanked her like informal sentinels. No one said a word as the front door opened and Jared stepped out. He didn't look angry, just emptied out. His hoodie was unzipped, and his eyes had the bloodshot glaze of a man who hadn't slept well in a month. Tanya followed a few minutes later, her arms crossed, lips drawn in a flat, colorless line. No eye contact, no words. The movers worked fast, methodical, books, boxes, a broken lamp someone hadn't bothered to bubble wrap. Tanya barked instructions without making eye contact with anyone but the workers. Jared moved slower, carrying a desk chair with both hands like it was the only thing that still belonged to him. From her place on the porch, Dolores sipped her coffee and didn't look away. Patrice leaned toward her. Want to go inside? No, Dolores said. I want them to know I watched it happen. Leah snorted. God, you've got a gift for the cinematic. They stood in silence for a while, watching as the life Jared and Tanya had layered over hers was packed up and wheeled away. A few neighbors peeked through curtains, but didn't come out. The ones who'd once nodded politely at block parties now looked away. Zoe arrived an hour in. She wore a hoodie 2 sizes too big and carried a small backpack. She hovered at the edge of the driveway, hesitant. Dolores stepped down from the porch and walked to her. You okay? She asked. Zoe nodded but didn't speak. Dolores reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was handwritten, her cursive neat and steady. Don't open it yet, she said, pressing it into Zoe's palm. Only when you need to remember your own worth. Zoe's eyes welled, but she blinked fast. Will I still be able to come visit? Dolores tilted her head. That depends. On what? On whether you want to, Dolores said. Zoe nodded.
Ido.
They hugged, brief but bone deep. Then Zoe stepped back toward the truck. She climbed into the back seat of Jared's car as he slammed the trunk with a little more force than necessary. Tanya glanced at Dolores for the briefest second, no words. No thanks, no acknowledgement, just a brittle, passing look. Then she got into the passenger seat and shut the door without waiting for Jared. The truck rumbled back to life. The car followed. Dolores didn't wave. She just stood at the end of the porch with Patrice and Leia as the last traces of entitlement drove off the property. When the road was empty, she turned to Leia. "Help me with something." "Name it." They spent 20 minutes changing every lock, front, back, side door, garage. Patrice double-checked each one and reset the keypad code to a number only Dolores would remember. That evening, the house was still. No footsteps overhead, no music bleeding through shared walls, just silence and clean air. Dolores lit a single candle in the kitchen, then retrieved a bottle of wine she'd stored deep in the guest house cabinet. The label had faded with time, but the date on the front was still visible. 2009 paid off. She poured a glass, walked to the living room, and sat in her favorite armchair, the one Jared once called outdated and tried to replace. She took one sip, then another. Outside, the wind rustled the empty oak branches. A mourning dove cooed somewhere beyond the fence line. Inside, Dolores whispered one word aloud.
Meanie.
The folding chairs were half full when Dolores arrived, mostly women in soft cardigans and stiff smiles, their handbags resting like anchors at their feet. The room was part of a senior activity center, just past the library shelves and across from the room, where someone was teaching chair yoga. Leia had already set up the projector. "You sure about this?" she asked, adjusting her reading glasses. Dolores nodded. "I don't have a script, just a story." "Good," Leia said, smiling. "That's how fires start." At 10 o'clock, a woman with a clipboard introduced Dolores as a homeowner, financial survivor, and someone who knows what it means to draw the line. Dolores stepped up to the podium. She wore no blazer, no title, just a quiet confidence in slate gray slacks and the necklace Zoe had given her 5 years earlier, a tiny silver acorn. "Most of you don't know me," she began, her voice steady. "But I know a lot of you. I know the silence, the discomfort, the way we're told to be grateful for being included in a family plan, a joint account, someone else's tax filing." A few nods. One woman in the second row shifted forward. "I was claimed for 6 years as someone else's dependent," Dolores continued. "I didn't find out until I read the forms myself. No one asked me. They assumed I wouldn't notice, wouldn't understand." A murmur swept through the room. "I filed a new return. I flagged the fraud. I reclaimed what was mine slowly, legally, and without apology." A woman in the back whispered something to her neighbor and wiped her eyes with a tissue. "I'm not sharing this because I want pity," Dolores said. "I'm sharing it because there are thousands of women who never get the chance to say anything before it's too late or before someone else writes their story." She paused, then added, "This time I wrote mine." Silence filled the walls. Then applause, soft, sincere, and building. Afterward, the workshop coordinator thanked her. Half the room came up to shake her hand. One woman whispered, "My daughter did the same thing. I didn't know I could do anything about it." Dolores pressed her hand gently. "You can." Later that evening, back at the guest house, Patrice arrived with a mock-up booklet in hand. On the cover, Tax Boundaries, How Not to Be by Dolores Mendes with commentary by Patrice Lang, CPA. "I printed 10 copies," Patrice said. "Pilot version, clean layout, stories, checklists, legal resources. You want more?" Dolores took one copy and flipped through the pages. "It's strange," she said, "to see it all like this." Patrice shrugged. "You've been the proof. This just makes it portable." Leia popped in an hour later with a bottle of cheap white wine and a folder full of printouts. "Financial forums are picking it up," she said. "Some tax attorneys are sharing it on LinkedIn. You're getting a reputation." Dolores raised an eyebrow. "For what? Being the blueprint?" Leia grinned. By the end of the month, thank you letters started arriving, Handwritten, typed, scrawled on yellow legal paper. Most came from women, some from men. All of them told versions of the same thing. I thought I was the only one. I didn't know what I was allowed to fight. Dolores read them in the quiet evenings, placing her favorites in a keepsake box Zoe had decorated years ago with glitter and rhinestones. One letter had only one sentence. You made me get a folder with my own name on it. Thank you. That night, Dolores stood at the kitchen counter with the last glass of wine and stared out the window. No lights in the old upstairs bedroom. No late-night noises from rooms she never owned. Just stillness. And then an email notification on her phone. Subject: Upcoming interview request, National Elder Advocacy Network. She smiled and replied with 2 words: let's talk. By early spring, the guest house no longer smelled like old carpet and lavender sachets. It smelled like ink and fresh paint, like purpose and possibility. The walls had been patched, repainted in a warm cream, and the floor resurfaced in reclaimed wood, courtesy of a local contractor who offered senior discounts and, quiet judgment, free work. Patrice had written the grant proposal. Leah had bribed 3 neighborhood teens with pizza to assemble the desks. The new sign on the porch read, Legal Literacy Center. Quiet power shared loudly. Inside, everything had its place. One cabinet held form packets, IRS affidavits, Title IX guides, and housing ownership basics. A second held donated laptops and locked storage for sensitive documents. A hand-lettered chalkboard listed open walk-in hours, tax clinics, and one recurring line under every week: ask for Dolores. And people did. They came quietly at first, mostly women, a few men. They carried folders with frayed corners, receipts in grocery bags, questions scribbled on the backs of envelopes. Dolores made coffee in small batches and never asked why they came. She just listened and helped. One woman stayed for 2 hours trying to untangle how her grandson had taken out a credit card in her name. A retired mail carrier needed help disputing a lien she didn't understand. A widower just wanted someone to confirm his property taxes weren't supposed to triple after probate. Dolores kept her voice steady, her manner simple, and her paperwork airtight. By the end of April, local housing nonprofits started sending people her way. Leah quipped that they'd need to hire a receptionist. Patrice began drafting a framework for the Literacy Center's 501c3 status. It started with a folder, Patrice said one afternoon, watching Dolores teach a man how to submit a Social Security correction. Now you're the folder. Dolores smiled but didn't respond. She didn't need to. Zoe came every Saturday. She never announced her arrival, just knocked once and slipped in with a quiet smile and a tote bag full of highlighters. She helped refile documents, printed resource sheets, and once corrected a typo in a flyer before Dolores even saw it. I like it here, she said once under her breath. Dolores didn't say anything in return. She just handed her another folder. One morning in May, Leah came in with a manila envelope and her phone in hand. Tanya's Instagram's gone, she said almost casually. Deleted entirely. No dramatic exit post, just vanished. Dolores sipped her tea.
Good.
Leah raised an eyebrow. You don't want to know why? No, Dolores said. I want her to stay gone. A few days later, Patrice mentioned she'd seen Jared's name on a staffing list for a local temp agency. Data entry, 3-month contract. Dolores didn't ask for details. That night, she updated her living trust one final time. She moved all residual funds from family allocations to center operations and youth financial literacy. Zoe's education clause remained untouched but now included a post-graduation internship opportunity at the center. She placed the amended trust in the top drawer of her office cabinet between the federal audit letter and the original deed. Below the drawer handle, she taped a small printed label: Impact, not inheritance. On the last Friday of the month, as the sun dipped behind the still bare trees, a woman walked in carrying a yellow folder and a trembling smile. I heard this was a place where people like me learn how not to be erased, she said. Dolores nodded and gestured to the nearest chair. It is. They sat. The woman opened her folder, hands shaking, papers barely clipped together. Dolores leaned in, steady as ever. She didn't just listen, she translated, she affirmed, she taught. And outside, the porch light clicked on automatically, casting a soft halo over the sign. April came in with mild breezes and the scent of thawing soil. Tulips cracked the edge of the garden bed, half daring the cold to come back. Inside the guest house, Dolores sat at her desk with a cup of black coffee, watching Patrice slide the final return form into its envelope. No dependents, no shared claims, no corrections needed, Patrice said, tapping the envelope with 2 fingers. You're officially boring again. Dolores smiled. God, that's a relief. Patrice sealed the flap and handed it over. Feels different than last year, doesn't it? Dolores nodded. This time, no ghosts on the forms. They both sat back in silence, letting the clean weight of the moment settle. No flagging, no affidavit, just a straightforward return, 1 signature, 1 story. Patrice gathered her things and let herself out. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was precise. 2 days later, a text came through from a number Dolores hadn't seen on her screen in almost 4 months. Jared M. Hey. Not asking for anything. Just wanted to say I'm sorry for all of it. Dolores stared at the message for a long while. Not with anger, not even hurt, just observation. She typed only 4 words in reply. Thank you. Take care. Then she locked her phone, placed it face down on the windowsill, and returned to slicing lemons for tea. She never blocked the number, but she didn't text again either. Zoe arrived the next Saturday with something folded in quarters and shaking slightly in her hand. Decision email came, she said, not breathing. Dolores wiped her hands on a towel and took the printout. Congratulations, you've been accepted to the Ohio State University. Dolores looked up. Zoe's eyes shimmered. You did it. Zoe let out a half laugh, half sob. They even offered me a housing grant. Dolores opened a drawer, pulled out a manila envelope, and handed it over. What's this? Year 1, Dolores said. Paid in full. No cosigners, no clawbacks. It's yours. Zoe shook her head, stunned. I didn't ask for. I know, Dolores said. That's why you're getting it. Zoe sat down hard on the nearest chair, holding the envelope like it might vanish. The next day, Leah came bursting through the door with a quiche, 3 bottles of sparkling cider, and a set of novelty balloons shaped like IRS forms. Happy No Dependence Day, she announced. Your first clean filing anniversary. Dolores blinked, then started laughing. That's not a real thing. It is now, Leah said. We're starting traditions, remember? Patrice arrived minutes later with homemade jam and a card that read in gold script, Congratulations on keeping what's yours. They ate quiche and sipped cider, toasting with mismatched mugs. Zoe came late but stayed longest, even washing the dishes without being asked. Before they left, Leah raised her glass one more time. To Dolores, she said, who turned a tax return into a revolution. Everyone laughed, but Dolores just held her mug and said, Feels good to file clean. That night, alone again, she sat by the window with her ledger open. She updated one line, 2025 filing completed. Status. Independent attachments, truth only. Outside, the wind moved through the new leaves, and the porch light clicked on by itself, steady, warm, and automatic. Then, quietly, the mailbox creaked open. She rose, curious, and found a single white envelope inside. No name on the front, no return address. Inside, a short typed note. We read your guide. We filed separate this year. For the first time in 19 years, my name is my own again. Thank you. Dolores read it twice, folded it neatly, and tucked it between Zoe's college letter and her own tax receipt. Legacy wasn't what you left behind. It was what you stopped letting others sign. The civic halls smelled faintly of lemon oil and floor wax, clean in a way only institutions could be. Rows of folding chairs lined the auditorium, polished under the dim stage lights. A banner hung above the podium, City of Columbus Civic Impact Awards. Honoring integrity in quiet places, Dolores sat in the second row between Zoe and Leah. Patrice was across the aisle, thumbing through the program with mild irritation. They put you under community education, she said. Should have been direct justice. Dolores smiled. Maybe next year. Zoe reached for her hand. Are you nervous? No, Dolores said. I've already done the hard part. The MC, a cheerful woman from the local library board, stepped up to the mic. Our next honoree didn't run for office. She didn't post a petition or stage a protest, but she changed the law for people who thought it was too late to change anything. She built something permanent in the backyard of her own recovery. Applause rose gently, respectful. Please welcome Mrs. Dolores Mendez. Dolores stood, adjusted the hem of her jacket, and made her way to the stage. The microphone hissed softly as she leaned in. I'm grateful, she began. But not for this award, she paused. I'm grateful for the silence, the kind that made me listen to the things people didn't say when they took my name or my signature or my space. A deeper stillness settled over the room. I was never afraid of the IRS, she said. What scared me, what still stings, was that the people who claimed to love me didn't think I'd notice. She looked out across the crowd. Her voice never cracked, but I noticed and corrected the form a beat. Then that's all. Applause again, longer this time. Standing in parts, Leia wiped her eye, muttering, Damn dust. Dolores stepped down and returned to her seat. Zoe hugged her, without words. That night, the house was still. A box of pastries sat on the counter beside a stack of envelopes from local schools, asking Dolores to speak. The guest house porch light cast its halo on the walkway, and a late rain began to tap gently against the roof. Dolores put the kettle on, moved slowly through the space, gathering her mug, her journal, the envelope Zoe had given her before bed. Don't open it until after, she'd said. Now the ceremony was over. The lights had dimmed. The work had spoken. Dolores peeled back the seal. Inside was a single piece of thick paper, a watercolor painting in soft blues and grays with a sturdy oak tree drawn in pencil at the center. Below it, in Zoe's familiar handwriting, you didn't just plant roots. You made a map. Love you always, Z. Dolores held it in both hands, chest rising slow and deep. She placed the drawing on the sideboard, lit one candle, and moved room to room. The kitchen, the hall, the front porch, where she once watched her son drive away with everything packed. Now there was nothing missing, just peace in every corner. She returned to the kitchen, tea steaming quietly beside her. And with one final breath, she whispered into the calm, I was never their dependent, and now I never will be.